Welcome to the first ever episode of the Spirit of Spaces podcast. I am so excited to start sharing with you and interacting with you in this way on this podcast. This podcast has been a long time coming, and I was just waiting for Spirit to drop the name into my heart and into my living temple space so that I could start sharing everything that I have learned and gathered along the way on my travels from working with people's homes, from working with people's spaces, to really bring that wisdom around the spirit of your space and how you can bring more spirit to your space, your home, and your body, your living temple. Because I truly believe, as a Feng Shui practitioner and an energy space healer, a psychic, and an oracle, that your body is your living temple and your home and your space is your living temple. And together they are symbiotic. Together they create a sense of harmony or disharmony. And we are here to bring you back into balance, bring you back into harmony, and get you so deeply rooted into your living temple, both your body and your home, so that you can really start to radiate your magnetic essence and bring everything that you desire into your life, into your home, into your relationships, into your health, and into your business. I'm really, really excited to start diving in with you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. So, in today's episode, I'd really just like to start at the very beginning of how I came into this journey, what feng shui is, what is energy space clearing, what do I mean by the spirit of your space, and how did I get to start doing this work. So I've always been very, very affected by my environments, by the spaces around me. And maybe you have too. If you are an empath, if you are somebody who is sensitive, if you are somebody who feels things very deeply, which I'm sure you are if you are tuning into this episode, then you will have felt the impact that your environment, your home, your space, and the elements around you have on your feeling, on your soul, on your spirit, on your vitality, your health, in your work, in your finances, your abundance, prosperity, business, partnerships, in all these different areas of your life. And one of the ways that I like to test that is when I walk into a space, I ask myself, does my spirit rise or does my spirit fall? And I invite you to do the same when you walk into your spaces. And this can be any space beyond your home. It could be your workspace, your office. It could be an environment that you tend to spend a lot of time in. Maybe it's somebody else's home, somebody else's space, but particularly in your home and your space. And this is something that I really started to ask myself, especially in the last 2 years when I was traveling around Central and South America with my partner, Josh. We'd left our house back in England. We'd rented it out and I'd left it in the hands of what I thought to be capable tenants, along with my cat Smudge, who, of course, was constantly cleansing the house and smudging the house as we were away. And as we were traveling and arriving on these different lands, I was starting to really realize that these lands held deep codes and deep messages for me at that stage that I was arriving on that land. And I started to really question, well, what's here in these lands? Do these lands have a spirit? Do they have an essence? What is it that they are trying to teach me? Because if we are the land and the land is us, and we are as above and so below, as it is as above, as so below, as within, so without, then we are deeply interconnected and symbiotic. And yet, most of us have been very, very deeply and severely separated from the mother, from the land, from Pachamama, Mother Earth, Gaia. And so when we arrive at a new land, sometimes we're confronted with some feelings that are stirred up for us, memories. It could be something from a past life. It could be something from this lifetime that's just stirring up something inside of you that needs to be addressed or looked at or explored or expanded upon. Maybe it needs to be alchemized or let go of. And so, as we were traveling around Central and South America, this was becoming more and more apparent to me. The first place that we landed in was Costa Rica. Now, Costa Rica is a country that is very alive in its essence. The land is very alive. The nature is super vibrant, super alive, and almost to the point where it's just so alive, it's overwhelming. And so, I actually realized when we were in Costa Rica that nature can be very overwhelming, right? And so many people are so disconnected from their aliveness, from their joy, from their essence, because we've been so conditioned and programmed otherwise, that actually, when you're surrounded by this aliveness and this vibrancy and vitality, it can feel almost overwhelming to the point where you can't necessarily handle it or have the capacity for it. And almost that's what happened to me in Costa Rica. Costa Rica is volcanic and it's got a lot of water. So in Feng Shui, when we're looking at elements, fire and water don't really work well together. It's very steamy, it's very hot, it's very combustive, right? It's very explosive. And so I found myself being extremely frustrated in Costa Rica, very, very deeply um, out of harmony with my soul and with my alignment. And it was very obvious to me, and it kept bubbling up and rising to the surface. And I would go down to the sea and I'd let it go and I'd alchemize it and give it back to the waters. And then I'd give it to the fire, to the volcanic land. But it kept rising up and stirring inside of me, literally like a volcano ready to explode. Like the land was mirroring me and I was mirroring the land. And as we traveled through Costa Rica, I realized that this was just not the environment for me. Nothing about it was really helping me to fulfill my purpose. Nothing about it was allowing me to feel at ease. I didn't feel grounded. I felt this constant kind of frustration and tetchiness inside of my being. And that was really the beginning of a journey for me where I realized how deeply lands hold codes and wisdom. This wasn't the first time that I'd experienced this because I've lived in lots of different countries abroad. I've lived in three different countries during my lifetime for extended periods of time. And I've had lots of wild and crazy experiences on these different lands. I've traveled around most of Southeast Asia, a lot of the Middle East, a lot of Europe, and now Central and South America, as well as the British Isles, Scotland, Wales, England, not yet to Ireland, but that's on my absolute grid work bucket list. And so I have traveled to a lot of places and experienced a lot of this along the way. After Costa Rica, we ended up in Mexico, and Mexico was an entirely different ball game for me. In fact, whilst we were in Costa Rica, I had a very clear vision one night in my sleep, in my dream time, that we were going to land in a town. It looked a bit European. It looked like maybe a bit like Tuscany, rolling hills, very artistic, bright colored houses, cobbled streets, and it was going to be very arty and creative, and I was going to feel really at home there. And we got off a night bus in a place called San Cristobal de las Casas in the state of Chiapas in the middle of Mexico. And it was exactly as I'd seen in my vision. And exactly as I'd seen in my vision, I instantly took a deep breath and felt a sigh of relief, and I felt at home. Now, during this time, I still had my old business. I was still a breathwork facilitator, ancestral healer, and I was working with women and supporting their liberation journey. And we got to San Cristobal, or San Cris for short, and we stayed in a house called Casa Espiral, which means spiral house or round house. And the house was actually based on the five elements of earth, ether, wind, water, and fire. And so it was this roundhouse with all these different features of the different elements. Now, I hadn't even begun to explore feng shui at this point, but I was staying in a house based on the elements. And it was during my time in San Cristobal and during my time at Casa Espiral that God literally said to me, you need to put down your business in its current form. You need to put down your podcast, your website, your community, all of your programs, all of your offerings, all of your clients, and just wait for me to give you the next set of instructions. And of course, when you're told that, first of all, you resist it. I certainly resisted it. I resisted spirit, I resisted God, goddess, telling me that I needed to put everything that I'd worked really hard for over the last 5 years down, completely down. And this is what I call the void space, right? This is like if there was another element beyond metal, which is something we use in Feng Shui, it would be void, emptiness, nothingness, no thingness. And for me, this is the fertile feminine soil. This is the space from which you get to create. And this is the space from which you get to listen to spirit, right? Our ancestors would sit in caves on their own and listen and receive messages from God, Goddess, from the land, from spirit, because they were in the no thingness, they were in nothing, they were in the void. And so I sat in this void for a very long time. But whilst I was in this house, Esperal, surrounded by all these elements, I kept feeling spirits in the space. I've always been connected to spirits. I've seen them, I feel them, I work with them, I clear them for people. I used to clear them for people in ancestral healing sessions when they would come in, ancestral spirits. And I kept feeling them in this house. And I would work with them and I would talk to them and I'd clear anything that didn't need to be there. And then I would start to feel, hey, I don't feel like that bed is in the right position. I really want to move it. Or why have they chosen this color for this room? And I would personally choose this. I feel like it gives a different kind of energy, a different kind of mood to the space, a different atmosphere to the space. And I kept feeling it and I kept wanting to change the house. But of course, we were just renting that house at the time. So I couldn't change anything because it wasn't my house to change. But I would feel it and it kept rising and it kept bubbling up inside of me. And I was listening. I was listening to the whispers of spirit. I was listening to the whispers of the goddess as she was moving through me. And despite me having resistance to letting go of my old business. And as we continued on this journey, we ended up in Guatemala at Lake Atitlan. And there, the spirits were very different to San Cristobal. Almost immediately, I felt like I was being rejected from the land. Now, the lake itself, Lake Atitlan, has a very, very deep and ancient history. It's surrounded again by volcanoes. It's active volcanoes surrounding this huge crater lake. So again, we've got the water and the fire as the elements in this kind of steamy, explosive, combustive energy. Again, reflecting to me the parts of me that needed to explode and combust and feel frustrated and didn't feel grounded and didn't feel safe. Whereas in San Cristobal, it was surrounded by mountains. And the mountain energy in Feng Shui is what's known as your backer, your support. They are there to anchor you in and ground you and be the support system for different aspects of your life, whether it's your finances, your prosperity, whether it's your health and vitality, your relationships, your business, your career, your true north, your purpose, creativity, your fertility. Wherever it is that you are exploring these different areas of your life, which can be found in these different areas of your home, the mountain energy in Feng Shui is your backer. It is your support system. In fact, they even call the different areas of the Laopeng compass, which is what's used to determine the directions of your spaces, the mountains, the 28 mountains. So this mountain energy is everywhere in Feng Shui and it's very, very supportive. And so it was no surprise that in San Cristobal, I felt that sense of support and that grounding, being surrounded by literal mountains and having that as my backer. Whereas Guatemala, Lake Atitlan specifically, was this big crater of water surrounded by volcanoes, just like it was in Costa Rica. And once again, I had the same exact experiences in my body and in my being as I did in Costa Rica, except this time the spirits were much more obvious to me. We were living in a house on top of a nature reserve that had been used many times for ceremonial purposes, and there were spirits there for sure. The house was what I would call spirited. But the spirits didn't particularly like that we were there. And the owner of the house had told us that we weren't allowed to light the fire, which I found really odd because lighting a fire is a way to welcome spirits. It's a way to give offerings to spirits. It's a way to introduce yourself to the spirits of that space and say, hello, my name is Shani. I've come here in peace. Do you welcome me into your home? Do you welcome me onto your land? Am I welcome to be here? I'm here to do good work. I'm here to support the grids. I'm here to support the land. I'm here to support you and listen to you and work with you as an ally. And without the fire, it's almost missing that element of the spirit. And so as soon as we arrived at the house and at the lake, I could feel my body starting to shake. I could feel my hands starting to move. My light language was starting to move through me. And I felt the spirit of the lake, which came through very serpentine, almost like a very nefarious, I don't want to say dragon because I love dragons, but it came through as this like serpentine energy that felt like it was siphoning. It was a siphoner. It was taking energy from the people. And it started to take energy from me. And it's almost as if it saw me arrive and saw what I could do, saw my psychic abilities, saw my oracular abilities, saw that I worked with spirits of the land, and was like, uh-oh, she's here. No way. Like, I don't want her to reveal to the rest of the world what I'm here to do and what she knows about me. And so it really started to siphon my energy to the point where I was just exhausted. I couldn't even string a sentence together. It was really wild how the spirit of the lake started to play with me, really play around with me and play with my energy. And I had to work extra hard there to keep clearing my living temple, my space, the house we were living in, the temple space that I tried to create into this very beautiful temple space, and then the energy of the land. And it was almost wild because I would go down to the lake and sit with the water and give it offerings, give it roses, give it flowers, say, hello, I'm here. Do I have permission to be here? I come in peace. I don't want to disrespect you in any way. And then I would meditate with the water and I would see all sorts of crazy, wild things. Like I saw a city at the bottom of the lake, and I could see that the people that had been living in that city were very sad. Like something had happened to them, and they were disconnected from their original essence, their original city. And then I also kept feeling the lake as like this very close shadow in my face. And when I started to share that with people around Lake Atitlan, they said, yes, at the bottom of the lake is made of obsidian, which is black mirror. Right? Maybe you've even heard of the TV program Black Mirror, where it's like this very uncomfortable dystopian shadow kind of reveals things in the world that might be hidden in plain sight. And that's exactly what was happening to me at the lake. I was seeing things in front of my face. I couldn't escape them. It was very close to me. And this was the obsidian at the bottom of the lake that was really showing me the shadows that I needed to move through. And the lake kept us there for 4 months. And the whole time I was there, I was clearing and clearing and clearing, and I was getting closer to understanding how connected I really was to spirits of the land and how important it was to introduce myself to these new lands, to share who I was, what I was doing there, that I came in peace, that I was here to give offerings, and that I was there to support the evolution of the land, not to harm it or destruct it in any way. After Guatemala, we went to Colombia. We were supposed to go straight to Peru. And I woke up one morning in Colombia, and being the psychic intuitive that I am, I turned to my partner and I said, we have to go to Colombia. I don't know exactly why, but trust me when I tell you we have to go to Colombia before we go to Peru. And he said, okay, I trust you. So we flew to Colombia and tried to leave the spirits of the lake behind, did a closing ceremony, said thank you to the land. Thank you to the people, thank you to the spirits, and arrived in Colombia. Now, Colombia was a whole other interesting journey because whilst we were in Colombia, now this was maybe 6 months now after we'd left Mexico when I started to get that message to, put my business down and wait for the next instructions, and the elements were coming through in the spirits. And we arrived in Colombia. And as we were traveling down Colombia, I had a message from one of my tenants saying he was leaving the house. And this set me off onto this very wild spiral. And I started to tune into the spirit of my home back in England. And I could feel that it was sad. I could feel that it was neglected. I could feel that my cat wasn't happy. And I could feel that there was something that was just kind of missing from the space. It was almost like the spirit of my home had died. And it was reflected in the fact that I found it really hard to find a new tenant to replace this tenant. And I'd never had an issue with it in the past. And so during our time in Colombia, I actually was feeling a really deep sense of homesickness. And it wasn't really for my home in England. It wasn't really for England at all, or my house, although I could feel the spirit of my house feeling very sad. I was just feeling this deep sense of grief of like, where is home and what is home and what does home really mean, right? We all love to feel safe in our homes. We all love to feel safe in our environments. And I'd been on the road for a really long time at this point in my life in general, having lived in so many different places. And as I was in Colombia feeling all this grief, I went out for a walk and I chanced upon a cafe that was run by a woman from England. And I was telling her my story, and she said to me, "Have you ever heard of um, I can't remember the exact name of it, but it was some kind of interior design, but it wasn't exactly interior design. It was more like an interior therapist, somebody who worked with people on the interiors of their homes and really supported them and coached them and guided them, maybe in big transitions in their life, like through a divorce or a death or an inherited home." And it really sparked something in me. And I thought, "Oh, that sounds really interesting." Now, I'm not exactly an interior designer, although I absolutely love beautiful interiors, right? I truly believe our homes should be our living temple spaces and they should be beautiful and sacred and rooted in ritual. That's why my brand is called Roots and Rituals Interiors. But I'm not really an interior designer, and I'm not sure that I want to become an interior designer, but it definitely sparked a seed into my soul and into my essence. And off of that, I started to do some research and I came across Feng Shui. And almost immediately, it just spoke to me. Yes, Feng Shui, it makes so much sense. How to move chi, how to move energy within your home. Yes, this makes so much sense to me. Now, I'd also lived in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, for 5 years. And I remember going to China and feeling this kind of weird energy. And I remember even when I lived in Singapore, when I was in my 20s, in my past life as a teacher, saying to people, I think they feng shuied this city to drain the energy out of the people and raise the prosperity of the city. Now, feng shui originally was used by the dynasty in China to bring the energy of prosperity to the emperors. And I'll do a whole episode on this in a separate episode. But it started to make so much sense to me. And I hadn't even ever really thought about feng shui when I lived in Singapore. I don't even think I'd even heard of the word, and yet somehow it came out of my mouth. And so it was obviously in my being for many, many years before I fully really clocked what it was. And I started to explore courses and I started to explore what I was doing. And then I realized I had been energetically clearing spaces all my life, all my life. From when I was a teacher in a classroom to being in different spaces on our travels to my home, I realized I was an energy space healer. And it was in me, it was just a gift that had come to me. And it doesn't really surprise me because so many of us, and you may resonate with this too, so many of us were priestesses in the temples. So many of us are connected to Isis and the Magdalene. So many of us were connected to the magic and the frequency of these temple spaces as priestesses, and we were bringing that magic to those spaces. And those temples, those old ancient sacred sites, all of them use frequency to generate magic, to generate power, to generate alchemy, to even use it to generate sound and light and electricity. So there is something so deeply rooted in this. And it just clicked for me that this is something I've been doing all my life. Now, we still hadn't found a tenant for my house back in England. And so there was a time in a city in Colombia after I'd received another rejection from a potential tenant. My partner sat me down and said, let's tune into the energy of the home. Let's just see what the spirit wants to say. Because I've been talking about this for quite some time now. And we did. And I could just feel how sad it was and neglected and just truly abandoned it was. It had lost its spark, it had lost its fire. You know, we used to light the fire in this house a lot, and I don't think they ever lit the fire. I don't think they ever did any kind of magic in here, any ceremony, anything that would didn't even water the plants. You know, we would like sing to the plants and play music to the plants and really vibe up the space. And so I tuned in and I could feel that sadness and that neglect and that abandonment. And my partner said, okay, well, what can we do about it? And I was like, well, on a practical level, I could get a cleaner in and I can get my dad to come and do the garden and just make it look nicer. And then on an energetic level, it needs a deep cleanse. He said, okay, let's do it. Let's plan that. So my dad came to do the garden. We got some cleaners in. I did an energetic cleanse of the space from a distance. And the next day, I got a tenant. Now that's when I knew this magic was real. And that's when I just absolutely knew that I had to study to become a Feng Shui practitioner. I was already doing the energy space healing and the energy space clearing. And it was time to add this extra practice and this depth of wisdom and knowledge to my practice so that I could start sharing this knowledge and wisdom. And so I am a fully certified classical feng shui practitioner. I'm an energy space healer. I am an oracle and I am a psychic. And I am here to create your living temple, your homes into temples of prosperity, of power, of peace, of sacred energy, so that you can feel so deeply rooted in your environment, in your space, in your home, and therefore in yourself and in your all these different areas of your life, in your health and vitality, in your wellness, in your purpose, relationships, love, self-love, career, prosperity, finance, the flow of chi, so that you can be as radiant in your life, as magnetic in your life, as you desire to call in everything that you want. The clients, if you have your own business, a flowing business with a flowing ecosystem that brings in the chi and the abundance, a relationship that feels aligned and in flow and brings that reciprocity, that yin and yang, as above, so below, as within, so without, the masculine and the feminine, to really living in your dharma, your true north, your purpose, represented by the north gua of your house, to really live in reciprocity with the spirits of your space, to understand that your home has a spirit, to understand that land has spirits, to be able to connect with them on a deeper level and have them as your ally. When we got to Peru, this is where it really anchored in, because in Peru, we were back in the mountains and I felt finally so at home and so grounded once again with the mountains as my backers. And in Peru, they have a concept called Aini, and it means reciprocity. And they understand that when you are in reciprocity with the spirit of the land works for you. They give their mountains names, they pray to them, they give gratitude, they give offerings of coca leaves. And living in this environment for 7 months truly taught me the depth of what it means to be connected to the spirit of your space and the spirit of your land. And I cannot wait to share more episodes with you as we go through on what it means to connect to the spirit of your land, how you can do that, what it means to have a spirit in your space and how you can work with them, how you can use feng shui to change the energy in your home, how you can really deepen your relationship to yourself through your environment and to your environment through yourself, how to make your spaces sacred, how to turn them into a living temple. This is my dream. This is my vision. This is my mission and my purpose to bring to you. And I cannot wait to dive in to episode 2. For now, have a beautiful, magical, spirited day. And I can't wait to catch you in episode 2.